Have you ever wondered what happens when you meet the right person at the wrong time in your life? My name is Marcus, and 6 months ago, I was living a completely ordinary life in Detroit. Work, home, work, home, until a bus trip changed everything. But before I tell you this story, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell, because what you're about to hear will make you question everything you think about love, money, and the choices we make in life. I never imagined that 3 days after a trip, I would be completely in love with a married, wealthy woman who would make me choose between accepting who I was or fighting to become someone completely different. And the worst part? She had just called me after weeks of silence, saying she might have made the biggest mistake of her life. But let me start from the beginning, because what happened on that bus was just the beginning of the most intense story I've ever lived. It was a regular Tuesday when I decided to take that night bus to Cleveland. I had some business to handle there, nothing major, just a few meetings that could wait. But anyway, the Detroit bus station was kind of empty, that end-of-workday vibe, you know? I took my window seat and settled in for another boring 3-hour trip. What I didn't imagine was that night would completely change my perspective on relationships and mainly on myself. That's when she walked in. She appeared in the aisle like she was from another world. Elegant black dress, not the flashy kind, but you could tell it cost a fortune. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled even after a whole day, and she carried a purse that I was sure was worth more than my 2-month salary. When she passed by me, I smelled a perfume that, man, it was like the air had become more refined. She sat 2 rows ahead on the opposite side from me. During the first hour, I couldn't stop discreetly watching her. She was nervously fidgeting with her phone, looking out the window with an expression I couldn't decipher. She seemed lost, you know. She wasn't the type of woman you'd expect to find on a bus, especially at that hour of the night. Something was out of place, and my curiosity just kept growing. When she got up to go to the bathroom, our eyes met for an instant, and I swear I saw something like vulnerability. On the way back, she stumbled slightly when the bus made a sharper turn. Instinctively, I got up to help her. "Thank you," she said, with a voice that matched her appearance perfectly. Soft, but with a touch of tiredness. "It was nothing," I replied, but I noticed she didn't immediately return to her seat. She stood there as if she wanted to say something more. That's when I noticed her eyes were slightly red, as if she had been crying recently. "Sorry to bother you, but would you happen to have a tissue?" she asked with a somewhat forced smile. Of course I had one. I always carry those things. When I handed it to her, our fingers touched for a second, and I felt a strange electricity. "Tough day?" I asked, kind of awkwardly. She sighed and looked around, as if deciding whether she could trust me. "You could say that," she replied, and then to my surprise she asked, "Can I sit here, just for a few minutes?" Obviously I said yes, and when she settled next to me, I realized there was something much deeper happening there. She wasn't just a beautiful woman returning from a business trip. There was a story behind those tired eyes, a story I was about to discover, and one that, without me knowing, was about to involve me in a way I never imagined possible. What she would tell me in the next few minutes would change not only the course of that trip, but the course of my life. She stayed silent for a few minutes, just looking out the dark window of the road. I didn't want to force anything, so I waited. Sometimes people just need a moment to organize their thoughts, right? When she finally spoke, her voice came out lower, almost a whisper. "We fought, my husband and I." It wasn't exactly a surprise, but the way she said it, with that mixture of hurt and relief, made my heart race a little. "Fights happen," I replied, trying to sound casual, but inside I was already way too curious. "No, you don't understand. This time was different." She turned her face toward me, and I could see the intensity in her eyes. It was 15 years of marriage, and today I realized we might never have really known each other. She told me the argument started over a financial decision he made without consulting her, but deep down, it was about much more than that. It was about control, about how she felt invisible in her own home, about how for years she'd been treated more like a decorative piece than a partner. The most surprising thing was how she talked to me, a complete stranger, with the honesty she probably didn't have with people close to her. "I packed some things and left the house," she continued. "I'm going to stay at my best friend's house in Cleveland until things cool down, or until I decide what to do with my life." There was something liberating in her voice, as if for the first time in years she was making a decision on her own. And me? I was completely fascinated by this woman. As the conversation flowed, I discovered her name was Helena, and that behind that impeccable appearance there was an intelligent and funny woman. She had strong opinions about art, travel, even about the politicians who appeared on the news, playing on the bus TV. It wasn't just beauty, it was substance, and the chemistry between us was undeniable. Every joke she made, every genuine smile that appeared when she forgot about her problems made my interest in her grow exponentially. "And you?" she asked, turning her whole body toward me. "What takes you to Cleveland on a Tuesday night?" I told her about my work, about the meetings I had in the morning, but I realized she was more interested in me as a person than in my professional obligations. She asked questions that forced me to think about what I really wanted from life, not just what I did to pay the bills. It was like she could see beyond the surface I normally showed the world. When the driver announced we were arriving in Cleveland, I felt a pang of panic. I didn't want that conversation to end. I didn't want her to simply disappear from my life as she had appeared. Helena must have felt the same thing, because when we started getting our things, she hesitated. "Look, I know this might sound strange, but—" she began, and I was already hoping internally that she would say exactly what I was hoping to hear. What she would propose next would be the beginning of 3 days I would never forget. "Are you in a hurry to get where you need to go?" Helena asked as we got off the bus. The Cleveland bus station was almost empty, just some cleaning staff and a few scattered passengers. I looked at my watch. It was almost 11 at night. My meetings wouldn't start until late the next morning, so technically I had free time. "Not really," I replied, trying to sound casual, but inside I was anxious to know where she was going with this. "Why?" She smiled in a way that made my stomach flip. It wasn't just charm. It was like she was inviting me to something I didn't know what it was. "Look, I know we just met, but you made me feel normal for the first time in months." She paused, as if weighing her words. "My friend Amanda won't get home before midnight, and I kind of don't want to be alone right now. Would you be interested in exploring Cleveland with me? Just for a few hours?" The proposal was too tempting to refuse, but part of me wondered if I wasn't getting into a complicated situation. A married woman, clearly with problems, inviting me out in a city I barely knew. But when I looked into her eyes, I saw something that made me forget any hesitation. It wasn't just neediness or rebellion. It was like she was rediscovering a part of herself that had been buried for years. "All right," I said, and the smile she gave me was like I had just given her the best gift in the world. "But I have to warn you, I don't know the city very well," I added. "Oh, I do," she replied with a confidence that surprised me. "I studied here in college about 15 years ago. Let's see if I still remember some places." We took a taxi from the stop in front of the bus station. Helena gave an address downtown, and during the ride she told me about the years she spent in Cleveland. She spoke with a nice nostalgia about her college years, about how she felt free and full of possibilities. "Those were different times," she said, looking at the city lights through the window. "I was a different person." There was a melancholy in her voice that made me want to ask more, but I felt it was too early to go that deep. The taxi stopped in front of a bar that looked sophisticated, but not pretentious. "I hope you don't mind more." "Refined places," she said, and only then did I realize that there might be a standard difference between us that I hadn't considered. The bar was elegant, with a decoration that screamed expensive in every detail. The people there wore clothes I only saw in magazines. I felt kind of out of place, But Helena seemed completely at ease. "Don't worry," she whispered, as if reading my thoughts. "Tonight is on me." There was something in the way she said it that made me understand she wasn't just being polite. She was, literally, paying the bill. We entered the bar, and she chose a table in a more reserved corner. When the waiter came, she ordered a wine I had never heard of, but from the way the guy reacted, it must have been special. "2 glasses," she said, and then looked at me. "Unless you prefer something else?" I said it was fine, but inside I was processing what was happening. There I was, an ordinary guy, being taken by a sophisticated woman to a place I would never step foot in alone. And the strangest thing was that she seemed to be having fun with it, as if I were part of an adventure she was experiencing for the first time in years. What started as a few hours turned into 3 days that seemed straight out of a movie. Helena had called her friend and explained that she had met someone, that she was feeling good for the first time in a long time. Amanda apparently was super understanding and even lent her house so Helena could have privacy. "She said it's about time I did something just for me," Helena told me the next morning, as we had coffee at a downtown boutique hotel, where she'd gotten 2 rooms, separate of course, at least on the first day. Cleveland became our personal playground. Helena knew the most incredible places, hidden restaurants, art galleries, even a bar on the top floor of a historic building with a view of the entire city. And the most surprising thing was how she paid for everything naturally, as if money was just a detail. "Let me take care of this," she would say whenever I tried to split the bill. "You're already giving me something much more valuable than money." Duckin, I didn't understand exactly what she meant, but the way she looked at me made my chest tighten in a good way. On the second day, the tension between us was becoming impossible to ignore. We were having dinner at an Italian restaurant she knew from college, and the conversation flowed as if we had known each other for years. She told me about the dreams she had abandoned, about how she wanted to be a writer, but ended up settling into marriage. "You remind me of who I was before," she said, playing with her wine glass, "or maybe who I can still be." When we finished dinner, she didn't want to go back to the hotel immediately. "Let's walk," she suggested, and took my hand. We walked through the downtown streets, and at one point she stopped in front of a jewelry store window. "You know what's funny?" she said, still holding my hand. "My husband gave me thousands of dollars in jewelry over the years, but he never made me feel as alive as you make me feel just by talking." That's when she turned to me, and before I could process what was happening, she kissed me. It wasn't a hesitant or tentative kiss. It was a kiss from someone who knew exactly what they wanted. And in that moment, I knew I was completely lost. You guys know how it is, right? When we meet someone who shakes everything we thought we knew about ourselves. If you've been through this, leave it in the comments. I really want to know your stories too. On the 3rd morning, I woke up in her room. I won't go into intimate details, but I can say it was one of the most intense nights of my life. Helena was different, more relaxed, more herself. We ordered room service breakfast and stayed talking about everything and nothing, like 2 teenagers in love. "I had forgotten what this was like," she said, her head resting on my chest. "What it was like to feel truly desired, not just useful." There was a sadness in those words that made me want to protect her from the whole world. But there was also something else, an intensity I couldn't completely decipher. It was during lunch on the 3rd day that things started to change subtly. We were at a sophisticated restaurant overlooking the lake, and Helena had ordered a bottle of wine that cost more than I made in a week. She was more relaxed, more intimate, but also more curious about me. "Tell me more about your work," she said, cutting the salmon with precise movements. "You seem too intelligent to be in a position that doesn't challenge you." The question itself was innocent, but there was something in the way she asked it that made me slightly uncomfortable. "I work in industrial equipment sales," I explained, trying to make it sound more interesting than it really was. "It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills." Helena nodded, but I noticed she was processing the information differently. And do you have plans to grow in the company? Investments? Side projects? The questions kept flowing, apparently casual, but I felt like I was being evaluated somehow. I'm trying to save money, to maybe start my own business, I replied. But even saying that, I felt my ambitions sounded small compared to the world she lived in. Later, when we were walking through the most expensive mall in the city, Helena stopped in front of a men's clothing store window. "You would look gorgeous in that," she said, pointing to a suit that probably cost 3 times my monthly salary. "Maybe someday," I said, trying to laugh, but she didn't laugh along. Instead, she looked at me with an expression I couldn't interpret. "You don't have to wait," she said softly. "I could—" But she stopped herself, as if she realized she was about to cross a line. During dinner, she told me more about her life, the house in Grosse Pointe, the trips to Europe, the country club, the charity dinners. It wasn't showing off. It was just her reality. "My husband always said I didn't understand the value of money," she said, playing with her glass. "But I do understand. I understand it gives me freedom, security, options." When she said that, our eyes met, and I saw something that chilled my blood. It was like she was comparing me to this equation of freedom and security. "Have you ever thought about doing more?" she asked, and this time there was no way to pretend it was a casual question. "I mean, you have so much potential. If you had the right opportunities, the right contacts—" Her voice trailed off, but the message was clear. She was evaluating me not just as a man, but as a financial prospect. And me, I was failing the test. "Helena, I'm not rich," I said, finally putting my cards on the table. "I never will be. I'm an ordinary guy who works hard but will probably live an ordinary life." The silence that followed said more than any words could say. The ride back to the hotel was tense. Helena was quiet, thoughtful, and I knew something had irreversibly changed between us. It wasn't just about money. It was about expectations, about possible futures, about the reality we were both trying to avoid since day one. When we got to the room, she turned to me with an expression that mixed affection with something that looked a lot like pity. "We need to talk," she said, and I knew those 3 magical days were about to end in a way I wasn't prepared to face. We sat on the hotel bed, and Helena was silent for what seemed like forever. I could see she was fighting something internally, weighing words, maybe even weighing feelings. "These 3 days have been the best I've lived in years," she began, and my heart filled with hope for a second. "You made me remember who I was before I got married, made me feel young again, desired in a way I didn't even remember existed." Her voice was loaded with genuine emotion, but there was a but coming. I could feel it. "You made me question everything about my life, about my choices." "But?" I asked, because I couldn't stand the tension anymore. Helena sighed deeply and looked directly into my eyes. "But I can't live on passion alone. I can't really go back to being young. I can't pretend the last 15 years didn't happen." She got up and walked to the window, looking at the city below. "I've gotten used to a standard of living that you couldn't give me. And it's not just about money, it's about security, about stability, about not having to worry about the future." Each word was like a stab. "Helena, but what about what we feel? Doesn't that count?" I got up too, trying to get close to her, but she made a gesture for me to stop. "Of course it counts. Don't you understand? It's exactly because it counts so much that this is so difficult." She turned to me with teary eyes. "I've never felt as alive as I have these days with you. I've never felt so myself, but I can't build a life based only on that." Her words were contradictory, and I could see she was torturing herself as much as she was torturing me. "Are you telling me you prefer an unhappy but comfortable life to a maybe uncertain but real one?" My voice came out harsher than I intended. Helena laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. "You talk like it's that simple. Like I could just choose passion and forget everything else." She walked around the room, gesturing. I have a house, commitments, a reputation. I have friends who respect me, a social position that took me years to build. And you're wonderful, but you can't give me any of that." The coldness in her voice contrasted with the tears in her eyes. "So, you're going back to him?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. "You're going to pretend these 3 days never happened?" Helena shook her head, not in denial, but in despair. "I'm not going to pretend they didn't happen. I'll keep every moment, every sensation, every word you said to me. But yes, I'm going back." She paused and looked at me with an intensity that broke my heart. "Because at the end of the day, I don't have the courage to trade a life I know for one I don't know will work out, even if the first one kills me inside. I knew you guys would understand this pain, because everyone has gone through that moment of choosing between the safe and the unknown. But leave in the comments, do you think she made the right decision?" Her brutal honesty left me speechless. Part of me wanted to scream, argue, convince her she was making a mistake. But another part, a part I didn't want to admit, understood exactly what she was saying. "So that's it?" was all I could ask. Helena nodded slowly, and then did something I didn't expect. She came to me and kissed me. It wasn't a goodbye kiss. It was a kiss from someone trying to record every second in memory. And when she pulled away, she whispered, "Thank you for making me feel alive again, even if it was just for 3 days." The next morning was strange. We both woke up in the same room, but it was as if an abyss had opened between us during the night. Helena was different, more distant, as if she had already started the process of erasing me from her life. "My husband called last night," she said while packing her things. "He's sorry, wants me to come home." Her voice was neutral, as if she was talking about the weather. "And you? Are you sorry too?" I asked, but she didn't answer immediately. She just kept folding clothes with a mechanical precision that got on my nerves. "Sorry isn't the right word," she said finally. "I don't regret meeting you living these days, but—" She stopped and looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. "But I need to be realistic. He's been my husband for 15 years. He knows my family, my friends, my whole life. He may have his flaws, but he can give me a life I recognize." Each word was calculated, as if she had rehearsed this speech all night. "And with me? What would you feel?" I insisted, because I needed to know. "With you, I would feel alive," she admitted, and for a second her mask of coldness fell. "But I would also feel constantly worried about money, about the future, about what people would think. It's not fair to me or to you." She closed the suitcase with a definitive click. "You deserve someone who chooses you without hesitation, who doesn't compare you to a different life. And I deserve the life I chose 15 years ago." There was a bitterness in her voice that made me realize she was trying to convince herself as much as she was trying to convince me. I tried one last time. "Helena, what if we gave you time to think? It doesn't have to be an immediate decision. We could see each other again, get to know each other better." But she shook her head before I even finished. "No, it would be worse. It would be torturing myself, torturing you, torturing my marriage. It's better to cut it off now, all at once." She grabbed her purse and walked to the door. My taxi should be arriving. I couldn't believe she was really leaving, that those 3 incredible days were ending like this. At the hotel door, she turned to me one last time. "I'm going to think about you," she said, and there were tears in her eyes. "I'm going to think about how you made me laugh, how you really listened to me, how you made me feel special without giving me expensive gifts." She touched my face gently. "But don't look for me, please. Let me keep these memories as they are, perfect and untouched." The taxi arrived, and she got in without looking back. I stood there watching the car disappear into the morning traffic. I went up to the room and found something she had left on the nightstand, a note with her perfume still embedded in the paper. "Thank you for showing me who I could be. Don't forget who you are." Underneath, she had written her phone number, but then crossed it out with such force that it tore the paper. It was clear she was fighting with herself until the last second. I took my things and left the hotel, but something inside me knew that story hadn't really ended. There was something in the way she looked at me before getting in the taxi, something that told me she also knew this decision would haunt her as much as it would haunt me. The trip back to Detroit was hell. I took the first available bus, but this time I couldn't pay attention to anything but my own thoughts. Every mile that took me away from Cleveland seemed to increase the pain in my chest. I kept replaying every conversation, every look, every moment of the last 3 days, trying to understand where it all went wrong, or if it really went wrong. Maybe Helena was right. Maybe I was being naive, thinking love was enough. But why the hell did it hurt so much if she was right? When I got home, my apartment seemed even smaller and more lifeless than before. Everything there screamed mediocrity. The old TV, the worn sofa, the bills piled up on the kitchen table. For the first time, I was seeing my life through Helena's eyes, and I didn't like what I saw. Was she right? I wondered. Did I really have nothing to offer besides feelings? I spent the rest of the day wandering around the apartment, unable to concentrate on anything, unable to stop thinking about her. The following days were a mixture of mechanical work and obsession. I did my tasks on autopilot, but my mind was always in Cleveland, always with her. I started researching about her on the internet, not stalking, just curiosity. I found some photos at social events, always impeccable, always beside her husband. He looked exactly like the type of man I imagined, well-dressed, confident, with that smile of someone who never had to worry about money. And me? I was just an ordinary guy who had been a 3-day adventure in her life. But that adventure had affected me in a way I didn't expect. I started questioning everything, my job, my goals, my life. Why did I settle for so little, I thought? Why had I never tried something bigger? Helena had planted a seed of ambition in me, but she had also shown me how far I was from where she lived. It was frustrating and motivating at the same time. I started researching courses, business opportunities, ways to grow professionally. Not because I wanted to win her back, but because I wanted to prove to myself that I could be more. 3 weeks later, on a random Thursday, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered without much expectation, but when I heard the voice on the other end, my world stopped. "Hi," she said, and just from that word, I knew it was Helena. "I know I asked you not to look for me, but I couldn't stop thinking about you." My hand started trembling holding the phone. "Helena," but she interrupted me. "No, let me talk. I went back to my husband, tried to move on, but..." Her voice failed. "But I can't. I can't stop thinking about what could have been." "What are you saying?" I asked, my heart racing. "I'm saying maybe I made a mistake, that maybe we should meet again, just to talk." There was a pause, and then she added, "Or maybe I'm just being a coward again, not being able to stay or leave definitively." I didn't know what to answer. Part of me wanted to scream yes, but another part, the part that had grown in those 3 weeks, hesitated. Because I knew that if we met again, it would be even harder. And I knew she would still have the same fears, the same insecurities. The question that hung in the air was, what now? What to do when someone you love comes back, but none of the circumstances have changed? So, what do you think I should have done? Accept Helena's invitation and risk getting hurt again? Or move on and leave those 3 days as a perfect memory? Because deep down, the question that won't go away is, to what extent can love overcome the practical differences of life? Did Helena really make a mistake choosing security, or was I being naive thinking feelings were enough? And more importantly, have you ever been through something similar? Have you ever fallen in love with someone who seemed to be from another world? I really want to know your stories in the comments, because maybe you can help me understand if it's worth fighting for someone who makes you question everything in your life, or if it's better to accept that some people are just lessons that life teaches us. And since we're talking about real and intense stories, How about you tell me what kind of content you want to see in the next video? Complicated relationships, difficult choices, second chances. Leave your suggestions down there. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, and share this video with someone who needs to hear this story, because together we're building a community where we can talk about the things that really matter in life.